So before we get into this week's episode, I just want to go over something I was looking up over the weekend. Apparently, Wonder Woman predates Rosie the Riveter. The concept and term of Rosie the Riveter actually first came around in 1942, and that famous image of "We Can Do It" came out in 1943. The first Wonder Woman comics were in 1941. Now, why am I saying this? Because our oldest and most endearing icon of feminism is being played by a tiny model in a Zack Snyder movie. Think we deserve better than that. And I promise this will be the last time I pick on Gal Gadot and Wonder Woman being in Batman Superman. At least until they do something stupid. Which will probably be soon. So last week, director Bryan Singer tweeted that the next X-Men movie is going to be called X-Men Apocalypse, and it's going to debut in 2016. Oh, sorry, my bad. He actually tweeted #X-Men, #Apocalypse 2016. I would not be surprised if the hashtags were actually in the title. And that's pretty much all we heard of until today, December 9th, when Bryan Singer tweeted that Apocalypse will not be an alien, and that Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy will be reprising their roles as Magneto and Xavier, respectively. So why is this a big deal? Let's say you're watching this and you're not really into comic books. What's the big deal about this Apocalypse? Also, why are you watching this if you're not into comics? See, Apocalypse isn't just a concept, he's a character. He's one of the X-Men's most popular and dangerous foes. He was actually designed from the very beginning to be a threat much greater than Magneto. And in some ways he is. Every time Apocalypse shows up in an X-Men story, it's always like some great big end-of-the-world scenario. Hence his name. And these stories are always generally big and epic and overstuffed and convoluted and way too long for their own good. See, there's this problem with X-Men stories, and to some extent Spider-Man, but we're not talking about him, where once a writer and artist team starts writing a story, they don't really know when to stop. And this is true of a lot of Apocalypse stories, especially the most famous one, Age of Apocalypse. That story started in February of 1995, ended in June, and lasted over 50 issues. In 5 months! Literally every single X-book was a part of that story, and I think they even made up some new ones just to keep it going for a little bit longer. Now you may be thinking that yes, there are other stories of a similar nature that went on way too long and have too many tie-ins, like Death of Superman or Batman Nightfall. And yes, those stories lasted a ridiculously long time and had a ridiculous number of comic books attached to it. But at least they're part of the main DC universe. So at least there's a sense of familiarity that'll help ease a reader into a ridiculously long story. Age of Apocalypse is an alternate reality story where nothing is familiar. Everything you think you know is just thrown out the window. Professor X has been dead a long time. Magneto's a good guy married to Rogue. Wolverine's missing a hand. Jean and Scott have another kid, but he's technically a clone. The world is riddled with crystals from the Shi'ar Empire. If I think about it too much, it just gives me a nosebleed. The story is very typical of 90s era excess in comics that just wouldn't work on the big screen without a lot of editing. And I mean a lot of editing. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I mean, just because they said Apocalypse is going to be in it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do Age of Apocalypse, the story. But then again, that is the Apocalypse story, so if you're not going to do that, what are you going to do? And they're probably going to reference it a lot. And the movie will be a sequel to Days of Future Past, which itself is a time-traveling story set in a dystopian future, so they probably don't want to repeat themselves or make another movie too similar to the last one. I just hope that what tends to happen in X-Men comics doesn't start happening to the X-Men movies. One of the reasons why I love the X-Men movies is their gross oversimplification of the X-Men mythos. They find ways to take very overcomplicated concepts and boil them down to a much simpler one that really should have been there from the beginning. I mean, what's easy to remember? The fact that Juggernaut got his powers from the Crimson Gem of Kaitorak? I think that's how you pronounce it? Or that he got his powers from, being a mutant like everyone else in the X-Men universe. Yeah, I basically just said X-Men 3 did something good. Come at me. But now with Days of Future Past and Apocalypse on the horizon, it looks like the X-Men movies are running out of the easier stories to tell and are moving more and more towards the complicated ones. And it sucks because you start throwing complex comic book logic on the screen, you're going to lose a lot of people. And that's going to do more harm than good in trying to get people to actually go to a store and buy a comic book. Seriously, how can a series that started out as a metaphor for minority oppression nosedive into a science fiction nightmare? Only in comics, folks. So what do y'all think? Do you think the Apocalypse is the way the X-Men franchise should go? How should they handle it? Or, better yet, do you think they should do something else entirely? Do you have a better idea of what the X-Men franchise should go for? Let me know in the comments. Seriously. It's lonely down there. Like if you like, subscribe if you really like, share with your friends, follow me on Twitter. I don't post enough to be interesting, so just letting you know now. Thank you very much. See you next time. Yes, when superhero comics were originally created in the 30s, they were created for children. And in the current market, the industry does not consider that age group to be their target demographic.
Oh my god, that's her?
Yeah. I'll post pictures.
You gotta post this picture.
Okay.
In particular, because that is not Wonder Woman.
Yeah, that's not Wonder Woman.
That's a tush.